on primitive Africans, people living on the edge or periphery of African civilization. And people like myself who seek to establish the quintessential African heritage are dismissed as romantics, because it's all very well to talk about primitives and tribes. Africa is either as a primitive in the past or a problem in the present. That's the only thing people are interested in. But when you start to deal with something crucial and serious that seeks to re-establish the essential equality of man regardless of his race, this is considered a romantic enterprise. But when they're dealing with primitives, it's not romantic, it is correct. As I said, I have lived all over Europe. I've not only lived in Western Europe, in London. I have lived in Eastern Europe. I have lived in villages in Eastern Europe where as many as 30 people share one bathroom. I don't write about European tribal peoples or European villages, because that is the edge of periphery of Europe. Europe's genius cannot be gauged by the lowest common denominator. We go to the ancient Greeks and Romans, the classical heritage of Europe. When we're dealing with European genius, why is it then romantic to deal with the genius of the African when we're trying to reclaim the heritage of our people? When we come to deal with the Egyptian, therefore, I want to make that quite clear, that we have reached a stage in our studies now where there is absolutely not a single doubt as to the Africanness of the Egyptian in that early classical period. Not only in the dawn, but in the Noon dynasty, the 18th and 19th dynasties. Diop told me that he's actually seen in the museums, he's seen Ramses II black. When they put him under the gamma rays, he's turned brown. The scientists did all sorts of things. I don't know if they deliberately did that, but he came out brown when they were finished experimenting with him. And I've seen similar things in the United States. When on December the 4th, 1975, I brought out an article on the op-ed page of the New York Times, Archaeology's Discovery of an African Presence in America, which the New York Times published under the subheading, Bad News for Columbus. And I published the beginning of that article, which was given considerable prominence and circulated all over the world. I noted that the Smithsonian Institute had stated on a man called Ubileka that they had found 2 skeletons of Africans in the Virgin Islands at Hulls Bay. They said they were Africans. They said they were in their 30s. They said they were found in a 1250 AD grave, which is more than 200 years before Columbus. They said that they had, one of them had on its forearm a pre-Columbian Indian ornament. Typologically and stratigraphically, that is both by style and by strata, where he was found, those Africans were pre-Columbian. Yet when this story circulated through the New York Times, through my publication in the New York Times, they denied everything. They said they were not sure they were Africans. They said that they'd once said it was a pre-Columbian dental ritual that accounted for the nature of their teeth, but they may have fallen on their teeth. They said that salt water had seeped into the bones and that therefore they could not carbon date the skeletons. They said there was so much carbon in the skeletons that if they used the carbon dating method, the Africans were not in 1250 AD, they were probably in the 23rd century. Incredible lies, utterly incredible lies, in order not to deal with this, because it was considered that if this thing got any further, it may lead to some trouble in the Virgin Islands. I have since found that where those skeletons were found, the highest incidence of bone cancer exists in the Caribbean. I don't intend to go any further in any revelations about it, because I would like to return to the United States. But this is serious business, that as soon as we come close to serious knowledge about our peoples, everything is put in our way. All sorts of arguments. They accept the African is supposed to have certain skeletal features and properties, etc. All along they're seeing that, and they're saying that as soon as they find him in the wrong place, where he should not be, all the classifications fall down. They want to change the classification. When Bruce Williams came to conference to show that Tarseti was the oldest monarchy in the Nile Valley, it preceded the Egyptian and had created the Egyptian, they stopped using the word civilizations at the conference. They start talking about cultures. And this has profoundly affected all research. There's no sense talking about democracy and freedom, and as soon as one exercises one's freedom to pursue a study, then that study is hushed up, or it is pushed in the corner, or it is dismissed from the mainstream. In a study of Egyptian civilization, the Nile Valley civilizations, to deal with the African presence in early Europe, we have to deal with that period in particular where the Greeks invaded Egypt. And in that period, we find that all the great Greek scholars, many of them, not all, many of them went to Europe to study, went to Egypt to study. We find Pythagoras, for example, spending 7 years in Egypt. Some people claim 22. He comes back and he profoundly affects the mathematical systems. He brings the Pythagorean theorem. We have evidence that it existed long before Pythagoras. We have evidence of many of the standards and units and measures coming out of the Egyptian world and touching the Greek. Not that the Greeks didn't have standard units and measures, because I'm no crazy diffusionist. That's the one thing I don't get involved in, that the Egyptians created the standards and the Greeks didn't have standards. I'm not saying that. I am saying that there were certain accurate measurements, far more accurate among the Egyptian scientists, which the Greeks took onto themselves and passed through their civilization. You have it not only in physics and mathematics, and Sheikh Anta Diop has written a brilliant paper in which he shows a whole series of mathematical equations in which you could see the profound depth in geometry, in trigonometry, in algebra that Europe owed to the Greeks, that Europe owed to the Africans through the Egyptians. Dr. Finch here has written a brilliant essay on medicine, where he has shown the profound depth that was owed, the Greeks owed to Egyptian medicine. The Egyptians were the first to devise a socialized medicine where everybody could get medical care free of charge. They were the first to have specialists, eye specialists, ear specialists, nose specialists, specialists for every organ of the body. Herodotus reported on this. They made advances in many areas of medicine. Their medical papyri are still with us. Their books have not totally disappeared. In spite of the vast destruction of African books, in spite of the sack of the Library of Alexandria, where perhaps as much as 500,000 manuscripts disappeared, we still have at least 10 surviving medical books from Africa. The most famous, the Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus. Edwin Smith Papyrus is 1500 BC, 3,500 years old, yet it contains chapters on intestinal disease, ophthalmology, pregnancy diagnosis, a whole range, helminthiasis, a whole range of things on the circulation of the blood, the pulse, diagnostic percussion, a study of fractures of the clavicle and dislocation of the mantle. With respect to that, we find paragraphs, whole word for word, taken from Egyptian texts and transferred to the Greek books, the Greek medical books, without any credit whatsoever given to the Africans. And then we hear about the father of medicine, Hippocrates, when he took the theory of harmony and opposites and actual passages, word for word, from the Egyptians. And these things are not taken into consideration. Nobody wants to admit them, even when they're presented. There is no talk about it. Dr. Papademos, a Greek physicist, has done more work to show the impact of the Africans, even the atomic theory. Newton himself, pointed that the atomic theory was first the Egyptian